Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Ma'aser Sheni, Perek Beis Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Yud Tes, and we left off on Daf Yud Ches Amid Beis by the brackets, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. So, an eroded coin, a one sela silver coin that was used to the point where some of it is eroded, which was what happened, which then was a coin that was not taken out of the circulation, but in the actual marketplace, it had a little bit of a less of a value. So first of all, such a coin is allowed to be used when it comes to the deconsecration of Ma'aser Sheni. The only question will be is how do we evaluate such a coin? And like I mentioned, even then, if you were to take such a coin to a bank, maybe in a bank you would get its full value. In other words, it's not like, let's say the coin is worth $1, and since it's rubbed out, it's only worth 99 cents, period. It's not exactly that way, because any coin that has the stamp of a king, the government honors it for whatever they honor that coin for. But in the marketplace, since there's a little bit less silver, it is bepoil, not given its full value, and we will see that we go leniently both ways meaning you have to know how do you use the coin when you go from the produce onto the coin. You have to know how you evaluate the coin when you go from the coin in Yerushalmi back onto produce, and we'll see how we do that. Now, the Mishnah tells us that mechalalin kesev al nechoshes midoichak, as we gave the case in the Mishnah where you had two coins and they got mingled, right, as we learned yesterday. By demai, just for the record, you are allowed to lechatchila even go from one silver coin onto another silver coin. And we're going to see how that statement, which is true, which is a Mishnah, will affect and be resolved with the sugya that we just said. You know, it's our Mishnah says, Mechalal in Kesev al Nechoshes midoichak, which implies that Kesev al Kesev, even midoichak not. We will see how that will be reconciled with the problem that comes from the case of the Mai. Now, the bulk of today's daf is fascinating, very much in alignment with the beginning of Perek Hazav in Bava Metzia, and that is the following. In the sugya of Kinyanim, as we know, as we repeat on occasion, at the end of the day, midoraisa or midrabanan, when is a sale final? When the buyer does meshicha, not when kesef was given and taken by the seller. Kesef does not at the end affect the kinyan. Not only that, as we know, that even after money is exchanged, the parties are allowed to back out of the sale. They're going to get a mishapara, but they can back out. What affects the transference, and in our case, thus the deconsecration, mishicha, number one. Number two, Meshicha is not done with the money. Meshicha is done with the schayra. Let's use the words money, merchandise. Question will be in our sugya when we are speaking about golden coins and copper coins and silver coins. This is the beginning of Hazav. When you are exchanging one type of coinage with another, which one is considered kesef and which one is considered schayra? Which one is the money? Which one is the merchandise? That's a very important question. And why is that an important question for our topic? First of all, it will be relevant for a few details of what our discussion will be, but the primary will be the focus of our Gemara, which is that outside Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to use kesef to buy schayra, which be'emes, the only schayra that you can buy with kesef Ma'aser Sheni is food in Yerushalmi HaKodesh. Before you enter Yerushalmi HaKodesh, you can't spend the money to buy merchandise. So in our sugya, when we're going and we're talking about mechalal and kesef al nechoshes, right, not kesef al kesef, you could be mechalal nechoshes and kesef. In the Mishnah, there's a machlokes beishamei and besilil. Can you go from kesef to zav? We're going to quote a braysa that has a machlokes whether you can go from zav down to kesef, whether you can go from zav to kesef. Outside Yerushalayim, guys, our whole topic is outside Yerushalayim, so that will mamish touch on this topic. In other words, there will be a issue of going from one type of coinage to another if the Meshicha is being done on the Schreira, and that is what finalizes the kinyan in whichever direction, then that L'cha'ura should not be allowed outside Yerushalayim, period, because you can't exchange or deconsecrate money on produce outside Yerushalayim. That will be the bulk of today's daf. And the final topic, I hope we get there, and that's going to go into daf chaf, is going to be a better understanding Bishitas Beis Shammai in the Mishnah. Beis Shammai says that you cannot go from silver to gold. Beis Hillel says you could go from silver to gold outside Yerushalayim, and the Mishnah brought a Ma'asim with Rabbi Akiva, etc. But Beis Shammai, who says you can't go from silver to gold, so Rabbi Yechanan understands that all of what Beis Shammai is saying is that once the produce of Ma'aser Sheni was redeemed on silver coins, now you can go from silver to gold. Even though gold is lighter, it's easier to take it to Yerushalayim. But even leBeis Shammai, you are allowed to go lechatchila from the food onto the gold. Like if I have produce of Ma'aser Sheni and I don't want to carry, I have a lot of produce. For whatever reason, I have golden coins. It's a coin. It is a coin. You know, the whole topic of whether a golden coin and a silver coin, which one is money, which one is chayda, that's all relevant. One to the other, one is considered money, one is considered chayda. But still, when it comes to produce and golden coins, the coin is a coin. The coin is considered money. So Rabbi Yechanan will hold that you are allowed to go from food onto gold coins. And amazingly, the Shlakish, that for sure will be tomorrow, will hold that you can't even go lechatchila from produce onto the gold coins. That will be the final topic of today. But let's begin. Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Again, we are using over here a eroded silver coin. So Chizkiah says that if you have such a coin now in Yerushalayim and you want to buy produce with it, and as I explained, when you go into a market, the vendor in Yerushalayim, normally seeing such a coin, will not give you the full seller value. He'll give you a little bit less. Question is, maybe you can't do that because there's a kedusha. Chizkiah says you could do that. That keshehu mechalala, when you buy produce in Yerushalayim, which is the act of the chilul, you are deconsecrating the kedusha that you had in the coin onto the produce. Then oisa kira'a, the merchant does not have to give the full value. He'll give it as the current value. Now, this step in itself makes sense because how can you demand of the merchant to do anything other? But he's adding another leniency. Now we're starting with today's daf Yutes. Now, you would think, at least be consistent. At least be consistent. You don't even have to be consistent, which means daf Yutes on the top, the way we will learn pshat, that I know that normally we use the words pidyon. The Gemara here uses the words mechalal oleha, clearly. But when you go, the first step, when you go from the produce of Ma'aser Sheni onto the coin, even though the coin is already a eroded coin, let's say, just in my bad example, $1.99, the emes in the market, it's only worth 99 cents. You don't have to limit yourself of only using 99 cents of produce to put on the coin. You are allowed to say the coin is a coin of $1, of 100 cents. And you can do that. Is oisa kiyafem. You are allowed to consider it as its original face value seller. So really, be'emes, what happened was that Ma'aser Sheni loses. Because if every peanut is worth a cent, let's just say. I had 100 peanuts. I had this bat seller, market value only 99 peanuts on the seller, but I'm allowed to use it kiyafa. So I had 100 peanuts that I turned into this bat coin. When I'm going to go in Yerushalayim and buy peanuts again, I'm only going to buy 99 and that's okay. I lost the peanut. Doesn't matter. We can be lenient. Now the Gemara will have a challenge, which is amazing from our Mishnah. Let me quickly remind ourselves of our case. You had 2 coins, and they got mixed up. One Ma'aser Sheni, one Chulin, and the whole procedure that you go from silver onto copper with Ben Azai, without Ben Azai. That detail is not negaya for right now. And then right away you go from the copper back into the silver. But the Mishnah says if the 2 coins that you have, one is better, one is worse, means one is eroded, one is not eroded. Says our Mishnah that when you go to the final step from the copper back onto the silver, you have to put it on the yafa. Why? From Chizkiah, you see, you don't need to do that. If I began with 100 peanuts, right, which is really worth a full seller, and I can put it on an eroded seller, and then at the end, I'm only going to use it as it's eroded. So you see, you don't have to end up with the bigger coinage. Why is it different? That when you go back from the copper to the silver, if both of these saloyim, and you don't know which one is which, you don't know which one began as Meiser Sheni. So you have to be machmer. Maybe the Yafa one was the Meiser Sheni, so you have to end up with the Yafa one as Meiser Sheni. But why? Even if the better coin was the original Meiser Sheni, even if, just like you see that you went from 100 peanuts down to 99, even though it lost all zayin. And no one is saying that you shouldn't be a nice person and go, lefnim yeshudas hadin. It's not that you should not be allowed. Yeah, if you want to do it on the yafa, that's your choice. But why must you do it on the yafa? According to Chizkiah, you should not have to do that. The yafa esara, the yaso isek yafa. It's mamish the same. And the Gemara says, no, it's mamish not the same. And such a great answer. Amar Rabbi Yoina. Ani Oimer. I just want to say a little thing. Ani Oimer. You know who says this by the Tanoim? Rabbi. Rabbi uses that expression. We know from the end of Soita that Rabbi was the real Onav. Ani Oimer is what people say now, Lefi Ani Izdati, in the later generations. And Stam Lahoyer, one of the greatest lines from Rabbi Zajac Shlita, is that when Talmidim, when we would say Lefi Ani Izdati, he would get so angry. He says, you think you're that big that you have to make yourself little? You're really little. Like a great man should say, Lifiani is dati. Like Yakir is thinking. That's the humiliation. That's the normal good humiliation that we got from him. So Amar Rabbi Yoina, Ani are just a lashon of Anivus. Ani Yoimer. I'll tell you why. Because maybe the coin that was Yafa, maybe was the one that was Meiser Sheni. So Sigmar says, so what? He'll explain. Makal Makim, nevertheless, when you went from the silver to the copper, at this point, none of them are Meiser Sheni. Lo yatzas l'chulin. In other words, it's not you're going, Mela, he's saying from silver to silver. And I want to tell you the big difference. Don't forget that in the case of Chizkiah, you're not going from a coin to a coin. How did you begin in the case of Chizkiah? You began with produce. The coin is the medium for the produce. In the case of the Mishnah, you're going from a coin to a coin. Maybe the first coin maybe the Yafa was the Meiser Sheni. So the Gemara says, so what? Now it's no longer Meiser Sheni. So Rabbi Yoina continues to explain. Amar Rabbi Yoina, that, let me just say this first by heart, the copper coin is only the medium. Yeah, because of the rule that you can't be machalal, even bedoichak, from silver on silver, you have to go down to the copper. And then let's throw in Ben Azai. And we do it in a way that you will never leave it on the copper. In other words, the copper is like it's a necessary legal step. But what's really happening is you're going from silver on silver. So if you're going from a coin to a coin, there even Chizkiah would be moida. You can't begin with a good coin and change it onto a bad coin. Imagine you do that. You have good coins of Meiser Sheni, and you're going to be mechalal it on bad coins. You can't do it anyways because we don't go from silver to silver. But let me just give a step ahead. By Demai, you could. You can't take a good coin that has in it Kedushas Demai, Meiser Sheni, good, and good it into that you can't do. That's already like you're cheating Meiser Sheni in the face. It's too much. Masha'enkin in Chizkiah's case, it's not too much. You're beginning with produce. You're putting it onto a coin. And like I mentioned, the way I think that these coins, if you were to go to the government, you would get its full value. Because the government has to recognize it as a dollar. The merchants, even today, sometimes you have a torn dollar bill. I know that they don't give you a discounted price. Many merchants say they don't want it. I don't want this dollar bill. Even though the bank has to honor it. The merchant can say, I don't want this. I don't want to have a problem later. Me using it and someone else won't want it. So there's a different logic when you go from produce versus when you go from coin to coin. Again, ayat went to copper, reading it inside, that lo yischaven la'asoi sechulin berurin, that when you put it onto the copper coins, It's not like that's the end of the game. No. That what? That the copper coins is only a necessary legal medium, but it's not really what your kavana is. Your kavana is to go from silver to silver. The Tanin, as we learned in the Mishnah, that loishi yikaim kain, you can't even leave it on the copper. Right away ala kesef. And let's add what we learned yesterday from Ben Azai. You know how we guarantee that? You take double the value in copper. Now, you're not machalal it on double. You're saying from the copper coins, half of them will be now ma'aser shenit. Who wants to have lechatchila, a mixture of ma'aser shenit and chulin? No one. You don't want to have more restrictions. In other words, it's done in a way where it's just a stepping. It's a step. It's a stepping stone.
In other words, the Kedusha's ma'aser shenit never left completely the coin.
Or let me word it. We view it as if the Kedusha's ma'aser shenit went from the silver onto the silver. So when you go from a coin to a coin, it's already too much to go from a bad coin to go from a good coin on a bad coin. So that answers. Okay. Weiter. Says the Gemara. And as I mentioned in the introduction, we learned this together in Masechtas Demai. Demai means produce that one purchases from a halachic am ha'aretz, in which Chazal made a takana, that some of the tithings have to be removed, even though midoiraisa you don't, and not all of them. One of the steps that you have to do all the way till the end is ma'aser sheni. When it comes to ma'aser isha, and you have to only remove it to be able to remove from it trumas ma'aser, to give that to the kohen. The ma'aser isha itself you don't give to any Levi. Why not? Hamaitzi mechavei all of araya. Ma'aser sheni, since you get to keep it, you have to do it. So the same option you have when you have real Meiser Sheni, that you get to redeem it on money and then deconsecrate it on food in Yerushalmi, the same thing can happen with the Mai. But the rule is that if you have silver coins of the Mai, and let's give the same case of the Mishnah Aviv, and there was a problem because you had a silver coin of the Mai, a Sela. You have another Sela of Chulin. You don't know which one is which. Dear, the din is, you don't have to go through copper. You go straight from silver to silver. So far, so what? Has nothing to do with us. Our Mishnah, that implies that you cannot go even midoichak from silver to silver. Of course, our Mishnah is speaking about ma'aser sheni vadei. But there's one step that will create a problem. And what is that step? That Rab Chagai Omar, Kumei Rab Ze'eron. That what? What did he say? He said that Menachem quotes B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan. Listen to this liner. Any action that is allowed to be done by demai lechatchila, if you have the same case, vadai is not the demai, the normal ma'aser sheni, then mechalolin oisoi midoichak. Whoa! Since the Mishnah says that by demai lechatchila you can go from a silver coin into a silver coin, now that we have the statement of Rabbi Yechanan, what is Rabbi Yechanan saying? Whatever could be done by demai lachatchila can at least midoichak be done by vadai. So I got a problem. Why do I have to go from silver to copper? The Mishnah says mechalol in kesav al nechoishes midoichak. What does that imply? Only mi kesav al nechoishes midoichak. But to go from kesav to kesav, not even midoichak. That contradicts. It seems to contradict the statement of Rabbi Yechanan. Right, and that's where the fitting goes. Since it says in Mishnah Mechal and Kesel Midoichak, which implies for Kesel not even Midoichak. How can that be? When Rabbi Yechanan says Kol Sha'amru B'Demai Mechalolin, then B'Demai yes Mechalolin Oisa Midoichak. Answers the Gemara Rabbi Ba Bar Koyin Ame Kume Rabbi Yoina. That Rabbi Acha says B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan. Listen to this now, a little nuance which makes all the difference. Kol Sha'amru B'Demai Mechalolin. Whatever is allowed to be done by demai lechatchila, when you have vadai, which is the case of our Mishnah, if you already did it, it took effect. That's what Rabbi Yechanan says. Bevadai, if avar v'chiloloi mechulol. What does that imply, Aviv? If you already did it, what does that mean? That if you didn't do it yet, don't do it. That's exactly what the Mishnah is saying. So really, there are three steps. What are the three steps? In our case, you have a coin of Ma'aser Sheni, you have a coin of Chulin. They get mixed up. Okay? You would have argued, just make a stipulation. If this was the original Ma'aser Sheni, Shalom al Yisrael. If the other one was Meiser Sheni, let the Kedusha go from this one on this one. You can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because even though there's a pressing need, there's a doichak, don't do it mikesev al kesev. Yes, do it mikesev al nochoishes. That is what our Mishnah is implying. Now there's another question. What happens if someone did it? They shouldn't have done it. That is where Rabbi Yochanan comes in. That if you already did it, that's, there's like two b'di'eveds. There's the b'di'eved before you did it. There's a b'di'eved after you did it. Person has a dish, and there's a certain mixture of meat and milk. So noisen tam lev gam, that's a b'di'eved, because what's the b'di'eved? If you're not going to use noisen tam lev gam, then you have to throw it out. But that's a b'doichak, and then lechatchila you can eat it. That you can't do by kesev al kesev. You can't do it lechatchila. What Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that if avar v'chila loy mechulol,
well, you have to upgrade. You have to upgrade every time. How come the upgrade to gold is not?
So hold your horses with the gold, because that will be the bulk of today's daf. I really want to get into it. It's so fascinating. So now, the next step is just a raya that this is the proper understanding of Rabbi Yochanan. Thus, our Mishnah and Rabbi Yochanan are not contradicting one or the other. Rabbi Yudan ben Pazei says in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Ba, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, clearly these are the words, that kol she'amru b'demai mechalalin, whatever lechatchila could be done by demai. Same case of our Mishnah, coin on coin, silver and silver, lechatchila, you can stipulate from silver to silver. Bevadai, if you already did it, avar v'chilalan michulalin, which means if you didn't do it yet, don't do it. Which is exactly what our Mishnah says. Before you did it, don't go from silver to silver. Go from silver to copper back into the silver. Okay. And now let's start. So again, in Perek Hazav and Bava Metzia, the question that we have over there, which is when you have two types of coins, copper and silver and gold, which one relative to the other is considered the money? Which one is considered the merchandise? Right, so I'm going into a money changer of it, right? And I'm giving him silver, and he's giving me copper. There's an exchange, correct? Like any other sale, like by a sale, what finalizes the sale? Not the giving of the money. Yes, the buyer doing meshicha, drawing the item, the merchandise to himself, or lifting the item up. I'm just going to use the general word of meshicha, okay? So when it comes to the general question, can anyone back out? Well, if Mashiach was done, you can't back out. There is also a shaila. If there was an exchange of copper to silver, of silver to gold, you can look at each one either as the payment, or the same thing can be looked at as the Mashiach and the Schoiro. So that's what the discussion is in Perek Hazav. Here is an extension of that discussion. Why is this negay over here? For one simple rule, my friends. You're not allowed to use money of Meiser Sheni to buy produce outside Yerushalmi. So now we're Mishnah when we are speaking about going from one type of coinage to another type of coinage. If the one that you have will be halachically deemed money, the one that you have that has kedusha, and the one that you are exchanging it for, if that type of coinage is going to be called schoira, produce, I know it's not food, but it's still schoira, then that in itself will make it prohibited, period. Sure, because that's how we view money, and two different types of coins. It's not like two green dollars, a 10 bill and a 20 bill. That's money and money, Aviv. But when you have different types of coins, don't forget that silver was the most commonly used. Silver was the one relative to copper. Copper erodes the quickest. There were small coins and they get rusty. What's it called? A green copper coin. It loses its value the quickest. People normally, the most standard use of money then was kesef. You know how you say money in Hebrew, Aviv? Kesef. Why not nochayshes? Why not zov? That's money. So let's go with the premise, if we're going to go with the premise, that if you have to compare one type of coinage to the other, I'll give you a mashal now. If you're exchanging dollars on Brazilian reais, I'll tell you right now, the Brazilian reais, money, it's not. It's choida. So what will be the issue again? We're speaking about, in our Mishnah, you went from silver to copper. And then we also spoke out, you can go from copper to silver. That's our Mishnah. You went from copper to silver. Then we had in the Mishnah Machlokes Beisham Beisil. Can you go from silver to gold? Put this whole question into this context. B'chlal, if you are exchanging one type of coinage for the other, if halachically will deem the one that you have as Ma'aser Sheni as the kesef, and the other coinage will be called the schayra, that will prohibit any exchange. And maybe not. And maybe not. Maybe not because of exactly what Aviv is saying. You can't compare me buying merchandise, I'm buying something, then exchanging money on money. Maybe that will always be permitted. Maybe. Beautiful, right? Okay, so let's go inside. So Tani we learned in a Braisa. And this Braisa begins, just a quote, by saying that one is lechatchila, allowed to go from copper coins outside Yerushalmi onto, onto silver coins. And the Chachamim say, I'll tell you better, you can go from silver coins to gold coins. Now, why would you be allowed to do it? There's another issue. We spoke this out yesterday. Why does Hashem allow us to go from produce on money? The Torah says, because it's hard to carry produce, it's easier to carry money. Use that same logic from copper to silver, from silver to gold. Why is this the same logic? Because the more valuable the metal, the same weight, the same size coin has a greater value. So if I don't want to have to carry something heavy, you got it, Aviv, same weight, the same value of copper and the same value of silver, which one will weigh less? The silver. Silver and gold, which one will weigh less? The gold. So the Braisa says that you can exchange, you can deconsecrate copper on silver, silver on gold.
What happens to the fee charged by the money exchanger?
We're not going into this right now, even though this is definitely something that has to be discussed. I would say just offhand, without knowing for sure, that may never be paid by Ma'aser Sheni. That has to be paid out of pocket. And then you have people that don't charge a fee. The gamach.
Another question, Rabbi.
Yes.
How can you say that it goes by weight? I mean, a pound of gold versus a pound of silver versus
the same pound, yeah, but it doesn't work that way. A pound of gold has a lot more value.
It's the value of life. The value.
All about the value.
It's the value. Okay.
Of course, it's the value. Okay. So first of all, that statement is a given. From copper to silver, silver to gold. Now, question is, we learned in our Mishnah that you can go, at least in our case, the Braisa doesn't even give you a case of a doichak, that you can go from silver coins to copper coins. I mean, our Mishnah said that. Okay? Now, one second. So we got that clear. So again, the Chachamim hold in the Braisa, you can always go up, copper, silver, silver, copper. In our Mishnah, we already know that midoichak, that's the case of our Mishnah. You're going from silver to copper, and then from copper to silver, which is not a problem. How about gold into silver? That's something that our Mishnah did not discuss. Guys, the Machlokes Beisham Beisil was to go from silver to gold. That was the Machlokes. I want to know whether you can go from gold to silver. And the Chachamim say never. So what will be the logic behind the Chachamim? Let's just think it out, just to speak it out. We're getting it. The Chachamim hold copper relative to silver. Copper is the merchandise. Silver is the money. So it's not a problem. Because I can go from merchandise to money. That's what the Eibishter allows. I can go from produce onto money. So I can go from copper into silver. The Chachamim also hold that now there will be a kasha on this. What will be the kasha of this? How can you go from silver to copper midoichak? That will be the kasha. The Gemara is going to address it soon. Because silver is the money. Copper is the schleira. How can you buy schleira outside Yerushalmi? We'll get there. Now, this Braisa considers, same idea, that when you have silver and gold, same idea, that relative to these two, when you have these two, the gold is the money and the silver is the... Yes, because it's more valuable. And it doesn't rust. It's more valuable, it doesn't change. That one thing, gold is forever. That's correct. Okay, I'm just saying what the Chachamim hold. We had the Semtedek Azov. Now go with that. Now it makes sense. So according to the Chachamim, silver relative to gold is schayra. Gold is considered kesef. Again, you can go from schayra to kesef. It's beautiful. So you can go from silver to gold. And same reason, the Chachamim never allow you to go from gold to silver outside Yerushalayim. It's all outside Yerushalayim. I said this yesterday. In Yerushalayim, of course, you think you're going to go buy a peanut with a golden coin? Doesn't work that way. It's too big, the coinage. It's too valuable. You break it down. You break it down in the store. You break it down in the bank. In Yerushalayim, you can do anything you want. Because in Yerushalayim, you can go from money to schayra. Same thing. But it makes sense that Chachamim will hold that outside Yerushalayim, you may never go from a gold coin to a silver coin for whatever reason. Why not? Because the gold coin is money. Silver, relative to the gold, is called schayra. You cannot exchange, deconsecrate money, Meiser Sheni, onto produce of Meiser Sheni. So that's great.
What's the difference from gold to silver and silver to copper?
That's a problem. Very good, Aviv. You're waking good. You're up today without the coffee. That's going to be a problem in the Chachamim. Even though it's only midoichak, how would you do that? I'll give you already. I'm going to throw back to you what you said. You see one thing, that coins on coins sometimes can be viewed as money. If it's money, it's less problematic. The problem is you can't deconsecrate money onto schayra. Well, if that's the case, why didn't you say it in silver and gold? I get that. Okay. Now, who argues with the Chachamim? The Tana, Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon. And what does he say? He says that Keshem, Aviv, what you just said, just like you find in the Mishnah Vidoichak, that you can go from Kesev al Nechoishes, Kach Mechalin Zov al Kesev. And I want to say the following, that Rabbi Elazar agrees, this is important to the Chachamim, that when you have the coins of silver and the coins of gold, Chais, listen to these words, Rabbi Elazar and the Chachamim are in agreement. These silver is produce, gold is money. He's saying what we just said right now. Copper and silver, everyone agrees in Hazav that Nechoishes coins is considered schayra relative to silver coins that's considered money. The fact that you can go from silver to copper is midoichek is araya. That chilul is not a sale. I get it. It's not a sale. That if there's a need, we can say it's money. Money is not the problem. The problem is to go from money into produce. So Hitaka uses mamash what you just says. Shame, just like you can be mechalo kesev al nechoishes. That's our Mishnah, even though it's only midoichak, but you can do it. Which proves, even though for other dinei Torah, we're going to say that silver and gold, silver is schayra, gold is money. How can you go from gold to silver? Because when you're b'machalol money on money, it's not like a sale. It's not like it's a new din.
An exchange.
Huh?
It's an exchange.
It's an exchange. Very good. You differentiate between a chilul and a sale. Very simple. A sale, you're buying something, you can't buy produce with kesev ma'aser sheni. We don't have to call it a buying. Very good. It's called an exchange. It's kach mechalon zov al kesev. Okay. So now we have these two opinions. Daf Yutesam Beis. I love this. Now there's a third Rebbe. Omar loy Rebbe. Now Rebbe is challenging Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon. Mipnei ma mechalin kesev al nechoishes. Why can you be mechalel silver on gold? Now I want to make that clear. Shekei mechalelin kesev al zahav. I want to make it clear over here that Rebbe is going with Beis Hillel, just to make a statement. Don't forget, Beis Shammai, the whole thing is only based on Beis Hillel. Why can you be mechalel kesev on the choishes? Maybe he's saying shekei mechalelin kesev al zahav. What's the comparison one to the other? What is he saying? What he's saying is that since in this one instance, which is going from kesef on the choishes, everyone has to admit that we differentiate chilul and a sale. We're kesef and the choishes. So since we have one area that everyone is agreeing, the Mishnah, that you can go from kesef to nechoishes, I will argue that kesef can always be viewed when there's kesev involved. View the exchange not as a sale, but as an act of chilul. No, when the silver involved.
Kesef with copper.
Kesef with copper and kesef with gold. It's about the kesef. So, since you can go from silver to nechoshes, everyone agrees to that. So we see from the Torah that sometimes when it comes to silver, if you're beginning with silver, so if that's the case, it's not about beginning. So you can argue that you can go from kesef to zav. Going to kesef to zav is because we're going to view it as a chilul and not as a sale. But the chalel zahav al kesef, but can you go from silver to kesef? You never can be mechalel zahav on the choishes. In other words, let me word these words, guys. Can I have different words? Is gold ever produce? Gold is never produce. Gold is never produce. So therefore, it's a big problem to be allowed to go from gold to silver. You can always go from produce to money. You can always go from produce to money outside Yerushalmi. So since we find that you can go from kesef to nechoshes, let me use it. So you see that kesef is produce. You can never go from money to produce. You can only go from produce to money. So since we find in one area that kesef is produce, so I can go from silver to gold because kesef is produce. You never find in any area that gold is produce.
Why can't you say gold? Big ones like consultant, when you buy a house, you don't make money. Even the house is worth much more than the money. I mean, like, it's a technical thing. You can say it's a much.
And that's what the Rabbi is saying. So Amar loy Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon. Shekein Maisa Sheni Shel Zahav Mechalin Oisei Al Moshe B'Yerushalayim. I disagree with your premise. You're telling me that gold is never produce. It's not true. It's not that it's produce. He says you could begin with gold in Yerushalayim and go down to any coin you want. You can go down to copper. We find where gold can be deconsecrated on copper.
And that means that it's looked at as produce?
He's not looking at the produce part. You know, Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon is backing himself up with his leniency that the fact that you can do something in Yerushalayim should we're not talking about produce, Danny. We're talking about going from gold to any other coinage. And you can go from gold into copper. You can go in Yerushalayim from gold to copper.
But Rabbi, I think the point they're making is you can't go from any other type of coin into gold, correct?
No,
like
you
can't
always
go from copper into gold.
It's not true, Vlad. We just said you can go from copper to silver. Everyone agrees. You can go from silver to gold. Everyone agrees. And everyone agrees, both the Chachamim and Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon, that normally when you compare, like in Azav, when you compare silver coins to golden coins, the silver is schoira and the gold is gelt.
Okay, what about the choshes? Can you go from the choshes to zav?
Yes, you could. You're going from produce to money outside Yerushalayim. Yes, you could.
Outside Yerushalayim. I'm talking about inside Yerushalayim.
And Yerushalayim can do anything you want. Anything you want. And that's this point. Okay. In other words, I'm going to go back to my words. The fact, in other words, he's not viewing the fact that you can go from gold onto copper in Yerushalayim because there you're buying produce. He's not looking at it that way. He's looking at it that when you go from coins to coins is fine. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Midivrei Shneim. Everyone agrees, both the Chachamim and Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon, that mechalelin kesef al zahav, Vlad ve'ein mechalelin outside Yerushalayim zahav al nechoshes. That's very important. In other words, even Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon, that's using the fact that you can go from zav on the choshes outside Yerushalayim. No one will say that you can go from zav on the inside Yerushalayim. No one will say that you can go from zav on the choshes. No one will say you can go that outside Yerushalayim. The machlokes between them.
That's exactly what I was saying. No, outside Yerushalayim, you can't do that.
No, you asked nechoshes on gold. I'm going in the opposite direction. Everyone agrees you can go from the choshes to zav outside. Everyone meaning Beis Hillel, not Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says you can't even go from silver to gold. So Beis Shammai for sure will hold you can't go from copper to gold. But we're not going Lishitas. This whole discussion was only Lishitas Beis Hillel.
Okay, got it.
Okay. And now we're going to focus on Shitas Beis Shammai. So like we mentioned, Beis Shammai is the one that holds, unlike we learned in the Braisa that everyone holds you can go from copper to silver, silver to gold. No, Beis Shammai holds you cannot go from silver to gold. So now there's a machlokes bishitas Beis Shammai. Guys, halt up. And today we'll learn Rabbi Yechanan, and God willing, tomorrow we're going to begin with Reish Lakish. So Rabbi Yechanan, says Rabbi Yechanan, what is Beis Shammai talking about? He's talking about someone that already deconsecrated, redeemed produce onto silver. And now you're going from a silver coin to a golden coin. Says Beis Shammai, you cannot do it. We'll see the reason why not. There has to be a reason. I want to know if a person has produce, normal produce of Meiser Sheni, and I want to go to Yerushalmi, I want to schlep the minimum possible. Am I allowed to go from produce onto lachatchila golden coins? Says Rabbi Yechanan, even Beis Shammai, yes, I can. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Beis Shammai only prohibits ela basoif. Basoif means you already have Meiser Sheni silver coins. You want to now go from silver coins into golden coins. Fadem zak Beis Shammai, you can't do that. Aval batchila, which means if you have the produce itself, and you're for the same rationale that we're saying, I don't want to have to schlep a heavy wallet. I want to schlep a light wallet. So I want to put it onto gold. Even Beis Shammai will say yes. And why would that be, Vlad? That's important because everyone holds that golden coins is called money. Don't forget, when you take something to Yerushalayim, you can never redeem it outside Yerushalayim, produce on produce. It doesn't work that way. We only do it if it becomes tameh. You go produce onto money. Copper is money. Copper produce, copper is money. Silver coins and produce, silver coins is money. Golden coins and produce, the golden coins is money. That's like, this is the Chabahemshech. It's only when you have silver and gold, that's where you have a whole discussion. And by the way, I can add a little nuance that Ulay, maybe you were going on that, Vlad, that since most people used silver coins, maybe silver and gold, silver is also money. People didn't, gold was not that commonly used. Gold is saved, it's not circulated. Gold is gevura. Kesef is you're spending it. Money was made to circulate, that's on silver. Gold was made to be held. May you all have a lot of gold and hold on to it. Okay, so now 1 second. Now, let's go with Rabbi Yechanan. Now, if he's moida that gold coins relative to produce, gold coins is called money, so why would you not be able to go from silver to gold? Why should you be able to? Nachamol, the whole reason why the Torah allows me to redeem produce onto money is because this Hashem is making it easier for you to take up Meiser Sheni to Yerushalayim. Going from silver to gold makes it easier because Vlad, you don't go from a pound to a pound. You're going from value to value. So he gives a gavaldic answer. So my Talmud Beis Shammai did all Rabbi Yechanan and take a look inside the Torah Oir Hashalem, and this is the pasuk that's going in step number 1, that v'nosato bakosef. You're taking produce and you are redeeming it onto money. V'tzarto hakesef b'yotcha. You bundle the money in your hand, and here you have a hey hayedia, not v'tzarto kesef b'yotcha, but v'tzarto hakesef. So Beis Shammai says, listen to these words: kesef rishon v'lo kesef sheni. Once you put it into kesef, you can't go from kesef to kesef. Ha kesef, the one that you put the kedusha in, that's the one you have to take. Now I have a very simple question, my friends. Aviv, can you go from copper to silver? We said, yeah. Well, why? Kesef rishon. We're going to get to that. But he interprets the word of ha kesef. No, it's really gold is kesef. Why can't you go from silver into gold? Not because gold is not kesef. No, because once you put it into money, it's like a gzeres hakosef. Put it into kesef, and that's the one that you take. Kesef rishon v'lo kesef sheni. 1 second. Says the Gemara, now we're going to have this Mishnah, God willing, tomorrow. I'm going to read you the words of the Mishnah. This is all B'shitas Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says the words, Bakoil hasela ma'ois. We're learning so much about money. It's a school. that asach geld kommt. So bakoil hakesef mois. I'll tell you, these words are cryptic. The literal translation in English will mean he may exchange the coins for the entire value of a seller. And these words can be understood two ways. And Avchafa Medalev, this Avrinon Meimar Kena Masnis, and our initial understanding of these words in the Mishnah is that Hametzaref Sela Mimois Maisasheni, that if someone is putting together a seller from copper Maisasheni coins, the Mishnah Beishamai is saying you can go from copper to silver. If that's the meaning of the words in Beishamai. We just said Kesav Rishon V'lo Kesav Sheni. So my Kedoin Tama de Beishamai. Why? Why is Beishamai saying, according to this understanding, that you can take Ma'is means copper, that you can put together copper, let's say 6 copper coins is 1 seller coin. You can do that and exchange copper into silver. Why would you be allowed to do it? So the Gemara says like this, that before you hit silver, I'll say this by heart, before you hit silver, when you have only copper, yes, you can do the produce onto copper and take copper to Yerushalmi. But copper is not silver. Until Kesev Rishon V'lo Kesev Sheni, Kesev means silver. Prior to it hitting Kesev, you can still upgrade it. Kesev means Ad Kidei Kesev. In other words, only silver coins are considered significant. Yes, I'm allowed to do produce on copper coins. I can't do produce on produce. I got that. Relative, it's all relative. Relative to produce, copper coins is considered money. You can do it on it. But obviously, nish can kesef. Venosata nish ma'ois. Kesef, zilber. Once you hit silver, now you reach the peak. And from silver, you can go to gold. We'll stop over here. I think just to hide off from all of this is, don't forget that kesef is Avas Hashem, and gold is Yiras Hashem. And let's go with the holy Baal Shem Tov. You see the chashivus, even though we need both. Of course, we need both. And of course, that Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem, the Tanya Perik Mem Aleph. But we, especially in the generation that's going into Mashiach, that the avoid of Kesef is the Iker avoid. The avoid of gold, of silver, the avoid of Ahava, of Avas Yisrael.
It brings you from what and see that Rabbi, when he was young, he thought like Kesef in Zov, whatever is more valuable is actually the money.
And it's not about what's more valuable.
Like when he retreated, when he was older, it was like, no, Kesef in Zov, Kesef is the money because you can actually buy with it. Zov is yes.
Level A, you can only do it with the Ava, not with Yira.